The rain had started before sunset, quiet at first, a whisper against the windows. By nightfall, it had grown into a storm that thrashed at the rooftops of Pine Hollow, a small town tucked between hills and old woods. Wind howled through empty streets, and the branches of the black-barked trees beat against each other like bones in the dark. The Miller family had just returned from visiting grandparents upstate. The long drive home had been slow, headlights cutting through fog and rain, the car tires hissing over wet asphalt. Inside the vehicle, the children had fallen asleep, and Claire Miller, their mother, hummed softly to herself. The only one who wasn't relaxed was Rocco, the family's golden retriever. He had begun acting strangely halfway through the trip, restlessly shifting in the back seat, ears flicking at sounds no one else seemed to notice. By the time they pulled into their long gravel driveway, Rocco was sitting upright, staring hard at the house through the windshield. It was their cozy, familiar home, lights still off, silent under the downpour. But something was off. Claire couldn't place it, but the air felt thicker somehow. The storm? The late hour? "Come on, buddy," James said, reaching to open the car door. But Rocco didn't move. Instead, he let out a low, reluctant bark, just one, deep and uncertain. Then, he whined and looked back toward the trees lining the yard. James laughed nervously. "What's wrong with him?" Claire opened her door, pulling her coat tighter. "He hates thunder, remember?" But thunder wasn't what he was warning about. They gathered the kids and walked up to the porch. The house key turned in the lock as usual. Everything looked normal, except for the way Rocco stayed on the steps, refusing to cross the threshold. His tail was tucked. He barked again, more insistent now, stepping backward toward the car. "Rocco?" Claire called, confused. Inside, the air greeted them, but not in the way they expected. There was a smell. Faint, chemical, wrong. James froze mid-step. "Do you smell that?" he whispered. Claire nodded slowly. Gas. That one bark, not fear, not thunder, had been a warning. A warning that, if they had ignored it, might have ended everything before the storm passed. James shut the door immediately. Not all the way. Just enough to stop the wind from forcing it open. "Don't go inside," he said firmly, stepping between Claire and the kids. The smell was growing sharper, more distinct now that the air from inside had mixed with the wet gust outside. It wasn't just gas. It was dense, like a layer had settled into the walls, the carpet, the air itself. Claire reached for her phone and dialed emergency services with shaking fingers. Behind them, the wind howled, and rain hammered the hood of the car. Rocco stood rigid on the edge of the gravel path, barking again, more urgently this time. Not at the house, but toward the back of it. Toward the basement vent. "He knew," Claire murmured, staring at the dog. They backed away as James made a slow circle around the side of the house. Rocco followed him halfway, then stopped, growling low at the ground near the gas line that ran under the back wall. James crouched and sniffed. "Yep," he called out. "Something's leaking. Probably the line cracked in the cold last week, and it's been building up since the dispatcher on the phone warned Claire, 'Do not use lights, phones, or anything electronic near the house. Evacuate to at least 100 feet away.' The gas could ignite from static." Claire hung up. She couldn't stop shaking. The children, barely awake, huddled beneath a blanket in the back seat of the car, windows fogging with breath. The storm raged on, and all around them was darkness, save for the house, which now felt more like a trap than a shelter. James joined them, breath visible in the cold. "We wait. Emergency team is probably 15 minutes out." 15 minutes, that's all. And had they gone inside? Had they turned on a light, lit the stove, flipped a switch? It would have been over in seconds. Claire looked at Rocco again. He wasn't barking anymore. He was sitting quietly now, eyes locked on the basement vent, his head low, ears pinned, alert, still, like a soldier on watch. And Claire realized something that made her chest tighten. He hadn't barked to get attention. He had warned them, as much as he dared, without setting off panic. He had sensed it, and somehow he had known that sound, not motion, was the only way to stop them in time. The wind howled louder as the storm crested overhead, bending the tall trees in the backyard and hurling needles of rain across the driveway. The Millers sat in their car, engine off, lights off, afraid to even roll the windows down too far. Any spark, even a click of static, could ignite the entire front of the house. Inside the vehicle, the air was tense and still. The two children, Olivia and Max, clung to each other, half asleep but sensing something was wrong. Claire pressed them gently to her side, keeping her voice low, calm. "It's just a gas leak," she whispered, though her hands trembled. "We're safe out here." But safe felt like a fragile word, like glass over a pit. James paced outside in the shadows near the tree line, rain soaking his back. He had turned his phone off, slipped it into the glove compartment. No one dared press a button, not this close. He kept looking at the house, waiting for something. A flicker, a boom, a light that never should turn on. Then came the growl. Rocco. The retriever was up again, near the back of the house, staring into the storm. Not at the house this time, but toward the woods. His head lowered, teeth just barely visible. James called out, "What is it, boy?" Rocco took 2 slow steps forward, then froze. His body stiffened. Then James heard it too, a new sound foreign among the wind and rain. Footsteps, fast, wet, moving through mud and pine needles, coming toward them, from the opposite direction of the road. Claire saw James raise his hand instinctively. She sat up straighter. Then, just at the edge of the light from the car's rear reflectors, a figure emerged, soaked, limping, mud-caked pants. A stranger. James took a step back. "Hello?" The man didn't answer. He looked confused, pale, blinking rapidly at the family, then back at the house. Claire opened the door a crack. "Sir, you okay?" "I live across the ridge," the man gasped. "Saw the lights. Saw the dog. Something's hissing in your wall." "We know," Claire said gently. "We've already called." Before she could finish, a blinding flash tore through the storm behind them. Not lightning, but a blue-white arc of flame, followed by a deep, guttural boom. All heads turned. The basement vent had just burst into fire, a controlled narrow jet of gas, ignited by a spark they never heard. The house didn't explode, but the foundation cracked, windows shattered, and a long, thin trail of fire raced up the outer wall like a glowing vein. James shouted, "Get back!" The car doors slammed shut. Rocco raced toward the car, barking madly, jumping up against the side door. The man collapsed to his knees, staring wide-eyed. Claire yanked the kids closer, and then, silence. Not from peace, but from expectation. The breath before either the house went up completely or the flame died. Somewhere in the distance, the scream of sirens finally pierced the storm. They were not alone. The fire along the basement wall hissed violently, a serpent of flame slithering up the siding, burning without sound for a second too long. Then came a crack, loud, like a bone snapping under pressure. James stumbled backward as a second vent near the crawl space ignited, the sudden heat flashing bright against the storm-soaked yard. And then, just as suddenly, the flames stopped. A final whoosh, and they were gone. Steam and smoke took their place, swirling in thick columns above the house, like ghosts that had changed their mind. The gas had run dry, or the pocket had vented itself. No explosion, just silence. Claire realized she hadn't breathed in nearly 20 seconds. The children were whimpering now, but not from fear, from the release of it, from the pressure lifting. Blue and red lights washed over the trees moments later. 2 fire engines and a county emergency van barreled down the gravel drive, brakes screaming over wet stone. Firefighters in heavy suits leapt out like soldiers into battle, shouting commands and stringing hoses with mechanical precision. Rocco barked, not warning now, but as if to welcome them, as if to say, "Finally." A paramedic rushed to check the man who had come from the ridge. His name was Warren. He'd noticed something was wrong when the wind changed and the scent of gas reached his house half a mile away. When he saw Rocco barking alone on the porch, he followed his instincts and the dog's eyes. James and Claire tried to explain what happened, but there wasn't much to say. Rocco had known, long before any of them. before the smell, before the lights. Inside the emergency van, wrapped in blankets, the kids finally began to settle. Olivia whispered, "Rocco saved us." Claire smiled, brushing a wet curl from her daughter's forehead. "He did." Outside, a firefighter inspected the line behind the house. Old valve. Pressure built up during the cold snap. Could have gone off the moment you flipped a switch. He looked down at the dog, who sat calmly by the wheel well of the van, rain dripping from his fur, tail still. "Smart boy," the firefighter muttered. "Real smart." James crouched beside Rocco and ran a hand over his soaked back. "How did you know?" Rocco didn't move. Just blinked, once, as if to say, "I just did," and maybe that was enough. By the time the storm moved east, a thin ribbon of pale dawn was stretching across the sky. Rain had slowed to a drizzle. The emergency crews were packing up. The house stood dark and broken, not destroyed but wounded. The Millers stood in borrowed jackets beneath a pop-up tarp the paramedics had set up beside the van. The children were asleep again in the back seat, wrapped in thermal blankets and lulled by exhaustion. Claire's arms remained crossed tightly, her gaze fixed on the house's darkened windows. She had spent years making that house a home, painting walls, folding warm laundry in the sunroom, tucking kids into beds upstairs. Now, it felt like it belonged to something else. James had already spoken to the fire chief twice. There would be an inspection, a damage report, insurance, possibly weeks before they could safely return. The gas had come from a cracked underground valve that had gone unnoticed for who knows how long. If the storm hadn't delayed them. If Rocco hadn't stopped them. Claire didn't finish the thought. Instead, she turned to the dog. Rocco sat quietly a few feet away, watching the fire truck lights spin in the mist, his fur still damp, but his posture relaxed now. His job, it seemed, was done. James walked over and kneeled beside him again. "You saved us," he said softly, more to himself than to the dog. "You stopped us at the door." Rocco leaned in, resting his chin briefly on James's knee, then looked away toward the tree line again. Watching. Always watching. A news van arrived not long after sunrise, and Claire gently declined an interview. This wasn't a story she was ready to share with strangers yet. Not while the scent of burnt chemicals still clung to her coat. Instead, she asked if the family could return to her sister's house for a few days. Somewhere dry. Somewhere that didn't smell like what almost happened. The emergency team agreed. The house was taped off, the gas shut at the source. Firefighters stayed behind to secure the foundation and monitor the vent. Rocco climbed into the car without protest this time. One final glance back at the porch before settling between the sleeping children. As they drove away, the house vanished behind a curtain of mist. The rain had stopped, but the memory would linger. And Rocco, quiet, loyal, knowing, stayed between them all, as if guarding something no one else could see. The living room of Claire's sister's house was warm, bathed in the amber glow of morning light filtering through linen curtains. Olivia and Max were finally resting, not just asleep but settled, their breathing calm, their faces peaceful. For the first time in hours, they looked like children again. Rocco lay at the foot of the couch, tail curled over his legs, chest rising and falling steadily. He hadn't left the children's side since they arrived. Claire sat at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched tea cooling in her hands. James stood nearby, leaning against the counter, scanning his phone, not out of habit, but because it had started buzzing nonstop. Texts, calls, voicemails, media requests. Someone from the fire department had talked, probably innocently, probably meaning well. The story was already spreading. Family saved by loyal dog from deadly gas explosion. Golden retriever senses gas leak before it turns deadly. A bark in the night that saved 4 lives. James sighed and put the phone down. "People want to meet him," he said quietly. Claire didn't look up. Of course they do. They're calling him a hero. He is one. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, thick with gratitude and disbelief. "We came that close," Claire whispered finally. One more step. One light switch. One click of a lamp. She paused, then said something she hadn't admitted yet. Not even to herself. "I almost told him to be quiet." James looked at her. "You didn't." No, but I almost did, and I would have walked right into that house. She turned her gaze to the dog on the rug. He knew. He knew James. He barked in a way I've never heard before, like he wasn't warning us of danger. He was warning us of finality. James sat beside her. I think he knew we'd trust him just enough to pause. They sat together in silence for a long time, watching the steam rise from the untouched tea. Then Max stirred on the couch and reached his hand down onto Rocco's head. The dog didn't move. Just let the little hand rest there, warm and safe. A week later, the Millers returned to their home. The air smelled of fresh timber and drying concrete, the result of quick structural reinforcements made by the city. Most of the damage had been contained. The burst vent, the blackened siding, a broken basement window. But the house bore scars, visible and invisible. Claire stood at the front step with the key in her hand, unmoving. Her other hand rested lightly on Rocco's head, his ears pricked and alert. The children waited near the car, quiet. Even they seemed to sense the weight of the moment. James nodded gently. We don't have to go in yet. Claire shook her head. We do. But we go together. The door creaked open, and Rocco was the first to enter. Not rushing, not sniffing. He simply walked inside like he belonged, tail raised just enough to show he was ready, as if reclaiming it, his house too. Inside, everything was where they had left it. The books on the shelves, the photos on the walls, the blanket half folded on the couch. But now it all seemed somehow brighter, more fragile, more valuable. Claire inhaled deeply. Nothing. No gas, no smoke. Just the faint scent of rain-soaked wood. Max clung to her side. Are we safe now? Claire smiled. Yes, sweetheart. Because Rocco's here. That night, as they lay in their own beds for the first time since the storm, the family slept with their doors open. No nightlights, no music, only the soft, steady sound of Rocco pacing the hallway outside their rooms. A gentle rhythm that said, I'm watching. I'll always watch. And as the wind moved again through the trees beyond the windows, it was no longer a threat. It was just a storm that had passed. And the house that never burned, stood still, because a dog had dared to bark